"Oh my, it's been a while, but I recognized you right away because you still look as frail and scruffy as ever. Are you wandering around here because you are sick?" At the hospital, I ran into a classmate who, for some reason, always disliked me in high school. "You've always been weak-minded and incompetent, but to be physically weak as well is just the worst. How pitiful." "Well, I'm actually your attending physician." "Excuse me. My name is James. I work as a resident doctor at the hospital. Doctors are considered to be among the successful in this world, but as far as I'm concerned, that's not the case at all. The term successful probably applies to every doctor but me." "Hi, Dr. Smith. How many children do you have?" "I'm still single." Mistaken for a married man by a patient, the hospital room was enveloped in an awkward atmosphere. Nurses, overhearing my conversation with the patient, struggled to suppress their laughter at the edge of my vision. "Dr. Smith, you somehow look older. Is it because you're worn out?" Isn't that a bit harsh to say in my face? Often mistaken for being older than my actual age due to my appearance, I frequently receive harsh comments from the nurses. Even though I became a doctor, my life is still far from luxurious due to my medical school loans. I'm in debt. So, the prospect of enjoying a meal out with a woman was out of the question, and the position as my girlfriend has been vacant for a long time. I must admit, I have a dull personality and simple thought processes. Fortunately or not, I rarely dwell on my misfortunes or unhappiness, managing to sleep off most concerns without it affecting my health. Even when I do notice, I think, I've lived this far without worrying. Why start now and just let it go? My family and friends often look at me with a mix of pity, calling me naive. However, I couldn't care less about other people's opinions. Even I, however, can't help but feel down when faced with the sharp words from the nurses who have both beauty and talent. They would say, "Dr. Smith, maybe you should take a shower, or it would be nice if a wife to take care of you would show up soon," offering nothing but harsh opinions. Even today, after a night shift, a colleague said to me, "You should shave your beard at least. It might make that face of yours look a bit better." "Even with this face is unnecessary," I muttered to myself, but I follow everyone's advice, as usual, and continue down the path of an unattractive loser. One day, a nurse scolded me upon seeing my appearance. "Dr. Smith, it sets a bad example for the other staff if you don't take care of your grooming. It makes the patients uncomfortable." Looking in the mirror, I saw my hair was a mess from sleeping in. Rushing and without time to style my hair or shave, my appearance was far from commendable. Indifferent even to my own appearance, I spend my days being reprimanded by those around me. "Dr. Smith, please don't sleep here." "Yes, yes." Nearly dozing off with a cup in hand, I was jolted awake by the sharp voice of the head nurse, Emily. Though the coffee in the cup swayed, it fortunately didn't spill on my lab coat. Had I stained my coat, Emily would have scolded me again. Today, I was unexpectedly asked to step in for a surgery, which ended up taking a long time. As a result, I had to stay overnight at the hospital, and by the time I finished the paperwork I had planned to do, I was starting to feel extremely sleepy. I thought about taking a shower and having coffee to wake up, but the quiet of the almost empty break room was so soothing that I almost dozed off right there. Sorry, I just nodded off for a bit. If you keep zoning out like that, it could lead to an accident. Snap out of it. My apologies. Here you go. This is the file for your new patient. Please go over it." After getting a bit of a scolding from Emily as usual, I was briefed about the new patient. While flipping through the file, I came across a familiar name and frowned and thought, Is it a name you recognize?" Seeing the patient's name and age, I found myself thinking back to an old classmate from long ago. Maybe I should go check on them. "Hey, you're off duty now, so please take off your lab coat. Otherwise, you might end up being given more work." Following Emily's advice, I quickly took off my lab coat and headed to the patient's room. Just before I reached the room, the patient came out and we bumped into each other head-on. Just as I recognized her immediately, she seemed to recognize me at once as well. She looked surprised at first, but then her face settled into the same mocking expression she had over a decade ago. Well, it's been a while, but you're still as scrawny and shabby as ever. I recognized you immediately. Are you loitering around here because you are sick?" She seemed to mistake me for a patient, looking at my worn-out, pajama-like clothes. "You are always weak-minded and incompetent, but to be physically weak too, that's just pitiful." She bombarded me with these harsh words, and I could only respond with a wry smile. Her name was Susan. She was a high school classmate, and although I don't recall ever doing anything to offend her, she had an intense dislike for me from our school days. It's possible I had said something insensitive, but we really had nothing to do with each other. We were in different classes and, under normal circumstances, would hardly have interacted. Yet, whenever our eyes met, she glared, and if I was nearby, she clicked her tongue. If I so much as broke a school rule, she would eagerly report me to the teachers. Back when I was more impulsive than I am now, I confronted her once when she glared at me. "Hey, did I do something to you?" That was the first time we ever spoke, and from then on, her hostility only seemed to grow. She completely ignored my question, as if my mere existence bothered her, and found fault with everything I did. She was the first in our school to get into a prestigious Ivy League university, and at the time, she was the talk of both the morning assembly and the staff room. Being openly disliked by her, a beautiful, smart, and responsible class president, meant that I was even told by our homeroom teacher to apologize for things I hadn't done. Even now, as adults, it seems her animosity towards me remains. Trying not to provoke her further, I carefully chose my words to clear up her misunderstanding. "Actually, I'm your attending physician." "What?" Her face froze at my words. "Didn't you know, my last name is Smith?" "I only saw the last name. I had no idea you were my doctor." "I recognized you immediately. It seems you haven't changed your last name, so you're not married." I realized I had misspoken when the atmosphere around her turned icy. Susan's face morphed into a terrifying scowl, and by the time I realized I shouldn't have mentioned her marital status, she had turned her back on me in indignation and stormed back into her room. Left standing there, I was at a loss, shoulders slumped. I really messed up. Although I wanted to apologize immediately, the curtains were drawn around the bed, clearly shutting me out. I could already envision a complaint reaching the hospital and getting a severe reprimand from Emily. The next day, I resolved to apologize to her and headed to her room. I was bracing myself for a complaint from her, but surprisingly, there was none from her. However, that's not to say there was absolutely nothing. A nurse who happened to pass by and overheard the conversation reported it, and through a different route, I still ended up getting scolded by Emily. I guess I'm the guy who's not only unpopular, but also unlucky. As I approached Susan's hospital room with heavy steps, I could hear a man's voice through the slightly open door. Just when I thought you could finally work at a decent place, this happens. I'm utterly disappointed in you. The harsh words from the man made me freeze in place. I've been subjected to various sarcastic comments, but I've never been spoken to with such coldness. Why can't you be like your sister? You always drag the family down with such shameful actions. The following woman's voice sounded distressed. It can't be helped. She's doing her best in her own way. Expecting more is just pointless. Another woman cut her off with a gentle voice. I checked the name on the hospital room again. It was indeed Susan's room. I didn't choose to be here. I could hear Susan's voice trying to argue back, but it lacked the usual forcefulness with which she criticized me. Her voice was small and trembling. All the things you do come back to haunt you, while your sister had job offers left and right even before graduating. You had to go through years of groundwork elsewhere, making detours before finally marketing yourself to get picked up. A disappointed sigh followed, and the words continued. It's shameful to see such a difference in capability between sisters who share the same blood. The father-like man said this, continuing to repeat similar sentiments. Peeking through the open door, I saw 3 people standing around Susan, who was sitting up in bed. Susan was biting her lip in frustration, her face downcast. Judging from the conversation, the 3 seemed to be her parents and sister. The way the words flowed out as they berated her suggested this was a usual treatment for Susan. To me, Susan seemed perfect, but it appeared her home situation was not. Even I, as oblivious as I am, could understand the situation in the room. Personal feelings aside, this is a hospital for the patients, and I am her attending doctor. I knocked vigorously on the door, not waiting for a response before opening it and stepping into the room. All 4 pairs of eyes pierced through me, but I'm not one to flinch at mere stares. Hi, I'm Dr. Smith, the attending physician. Nice to meet the family, and please leave soon. Visits that burden the patient are not allowed. While the parents were taken aback, the sister quickly recovered from my surprise attack and started speaking boldly. What are you talking about? Are you saying it's not a problem for you to intrude on our family gathering? Family gathering, blaming the sick for their illness, calling them disgraceful, saying they've always been the lesser one, and ganging up on a patient like this, that's a novel idea for a family gathering. My words seemed to unsettle them, with the parents exchanging glances. Yet, Kate, Susan's sister, continued to argue. We're family, and that's why we can say these things. It's for her own good. Kate, with a sticky, sweet smile, was about to say more when Susan cut her off with a cry. Stop it, what's for my good? You don't care about me at all. Susan must have been holding back a lot until now. Her patience seemed to have run out as she vented her frustrations on her family. No matter how hard I try, I've never been praised. This is wrong, something's missing. Kate did this, Kate was like that, Kate would have. I'm sick of it. Susan's voice was almost a scream by the end, causing her sister to retract her creepy smile and snort. It can't be helped. The truth is, you are inferior to me. Telling you the truth and making you understand your place is what families do. You really are a hopeless case. Kate sighed with twisted logic, and I felt a chill down my spine. But Susan, who must have been aware of her sister's abnormality, completely ignored her and glared at her parents. When Kate wanted a pet, you immediately got a dog for her, but when I brought home a stray kitten, you told me you'd given it away while I was at school, right, Mom? But then, a year later, my family-loving sister told me the truth. It wasn't given away. You had taken it to the shelter to be put down, and you didn't tell me right away because you knew I'd go looking for it. Susan's voice trembled slightly with tears, but after taking a deep breath, she continued calmly. You're right, Kate. I was a fool. I'm done seeking love from people like you. From now on, you don't have to think of me as family. And I won't think of you that way either, so please leave. Don't ever come back. Susan firmly declared her disownment. With that, her sister snorted. Then, from now on, even if you're in trouble, don't rely on us. I doubt anyone would want to help you. Fight your illness on your own. Kate spat out those words and left the hospital room with her parents. The room became silent once they were gone, returning to its usual sterile atmosphere. Days later, in the courtyard on a mild spring day, I approached Susan, who was sitting on a bench looking up at the sky. Hey there. She glanced at me briefly, keeping her face turned upwards. Since the day she broke ties with her family, her prickly attitude towards me had softened somewhat. But it hadn't disappeared entirely. I still got a sharp comment whenever we met. Are you sure it's okay to have such an unreliable doctor? That's a harsh way to put it. I'm worried I might catch some strange germs from this unhygienic doctor. Despite the harsh words, the nurses have been reassuring, saying that I'm competent, so there haven't been any formal complaints yet. But my mentality is certainly wearing thin. Ignoring Susan's reaction, I sat down beside her. Are you feeling nervous? I tried to speak as gently as possible. Susan's surgery was scheduled in 2 days. Even if it went well, she would need lifelong medication and occasional convalescence. I was much more nervous during my final job interview. Believe it or not, I had an offer from an international company. That's amazing. I was genuinely impressed, but Susan smiled self-deprecatingly. Well, I had to decline it because of my illness. My family was disappointed, and they lashed out at me. It was a mess. Far from receiving sympathy from her family, she was actually in such a situation. They probably blamed her more for declining the job offer rather than worrying about her illness. That's unfortunate, but with your talents, once things settle down, there'll be plenty of companies wanting you. When I tried to cheer her up, Susan fell silent for a moment before speaking. You've been a bit of help, you know. It was the first time she had mentioned what happened in the hospital room. Why did you help me? You thought I was a terrible person, didn't you? I'm your attending physician, after all. It's my job to put noisy visitors in their place. I put on a show of bravado. Honestly, I'm not usually that assertive. Back then, I really didn't want to intervene, and there was a chance I would have been talked down. If Susan hadn't declared her estrangement, it might have led to an ever-ending argument. I've hated you since high school. Really. It hurt to be told that directly, but I tried to remain calm. You weren't particularly good-looking or smart, always walking around confidently with your messy hair and wrinkled shirt. You were careless and insensitive, often upsetting teachers and girls. She spoke in a flat voice, recounting my embarrassing past. I try to live without dwelling on the past, but remembering it now is cringeworthy. My self-esteem was definitely taking a hit. But you always had people around you, and you got along well with your brother, who was a year ahead. No one really spoke badly of you to your face. Indeed, no one directly confronted me about my character. I had been scolded many times, but I also received plenty of praise. I must have had a fairly normal upbringing. I was trying so hard in that family, yet nobody loved me, and I couldn't get along with my sister. I always wondered, why is it so unfair? I would probably feel the same if I were in such a household. Then you appeared, seemingly without effort, having everything I wanted. You got along with your brother so naturally, and I resented you for it. That was the reason Susan had always been hostile towards me. Even though we both have siblings, what's the difference between you and me? Siblings. Even though I understood her reasoning, I still had to clear up a misunderstanding. Well, I don't know if it's okay to say this now, but my brother and I aren't actually blood related. What? Susan, who had been gazing up at the sky for a while, turned to face me for the first time. Her eyes were wide, possibly from surprise. Both my brother and I are adopted. Our parents are foster parents, and I could probably find out who my real parents are if I looked into it, but I've never felt the need to do so. Adopted, both of you? Yeah, we have other siblings too, all of them adopted. It's kind of like a collection, but to me, they are what I'd call family. How come you get along so well with your brother, just like a real family, even though you're step-siblings? It wasn't all perfect from the start. We've been through a lot, but overcoming those challenges, we've built a bond stronger than that of real brothers. I had no idea about any of this. Back then, we weren't exactly in a position to share such stories, you and I. For those close to me, our family's story was well known, but for Susan, who was unaware, it must have been quite a shock. After hearing my story, Susan looked down, her expression filled with deep thought. I'm really the worst. Being in such a privileged position, and yet harboring envy without knowing the full story, taking out my frustrations on you. I'm as bad as they say. She suddenly seemed to lose her confidence, which took me by surprise. Hey, don't get so down all of a sudden. You're scaring me. I'm just an unattractive girl anyway. It seemed my words struck a nerve, but it also revived her spirit as she glared at me. I'm always told I'll be fine on my own. That's what all you guys say. I'm just a woman unloved by her family or anyone else. While I felt a bit of empathy for her self-deprecation, I sighed in relief when I noticed someone in the corner of my eye. That's not true. Look, there's someone who cares about you right over there. Following my words and gaze, Susan noticed a middle-aged woman standing a short distance away. The woman, named Dorothy, had been a long-time housekeeper at Susan's home. She could be considered Susan's second mother, worried about her after her family stopped visiting and coming to take care of her during her hospital stay. She's a good person. She always asks me to take good care of you. Maybe you should consider her your parent, even if you're not related by blood. There you go, saying careless things again. When I made such a casual remark, Susan raised her voice in response. Then, standing up, she quickly walked towards Dorothy. Seeing Susan and Dorothy greet each other from afar, I waved back at them enthusiastically. To an outsider, their easy and unreserved relationship might indeed appear to be that of a true mother and daughter. For someone like me, who grew up without parents, the concept of blood relation seems trivial. If there's mutual respect and affection akin to that of a parent and child, that's what I consider a family. As I absent-mindedly watched Susan and Dorothy enter the ward, the sound of the hospital's intercom system reached my ears. It's likely Emily is looking for me again. With a sense of resignation, I started walking as if to follow the two of them. I need to do my best as a doctor to ensure they can continue to enjoy their close relationship,